Hi, I'm Admiral, and in this video, I'll be doing something a little different. Instead of our usual gameplay, I want to start explaining some concepts within the Pokemon games and maybe make a little series out of it. Hopefully, this will become a resource for anyone, whether you're a complete novice, someone who's played the games but never really explored the mechanics, or a veteran that just wants to refresh their knowledge. Today's video will be all about stab. To talk about any concept in a game, I like to approach it by explaining the what it is, how it works, and ways that you can use it to improve your own gameplay. The first part is actually pretty simple. Have you ever been playing Pokemon and thought that moves that match your Pokemon's type seem to do more damage? Well, the good news is that you're not crazy. What you're experiencing is the same type attack bonus, stab for short. And that pretty much addresses the what of it. As the name says, moves that match a Pokemon's type get a bonus to their damage. It really is that straightforward. Now we have to get into how stab works from a technical perspective. Luckily, the actual math is standard across the board. Stab offers a 50% boost to an attacking move's base power. I want to put special emphasis on the attacking move part of that sentence. Status and setup moves do not receive any buff from stab. For example, let's look at Swords Dance. It's a normal type move that raises the user's attack stat by 2 stages. A normal type Pokemon using it won't see any additional benefit. However, a normal type Pokemon using a move like Body Slam would see its base damage go from 85 to about 128. There are also some damaging moves that don't receive any help from stab. One example of this is the move Dragon Rage, which always does 60 points of damage. Moves that have set damage like Dragon Rage, or that scale based on damage dealt by an opposing Pokemon like Counter, don't receive any stab bonuses. Again, pretty simple, right? Well, yes and no. You see, there are a lot of ways for a Pokemon to gain stab, lose stab, or boost stab. For example, the abilities Protean and Libero change the user's type to match a move before they use it. Therefore, Pokemon with these abilities will always receive stab, no matter what their original type was. That also gives a Pokemon 4 potential types instead of the normal maximum of 2, making for some unique matchups both offensively and defensively. There are also abilities like Normalize, Pixelate, and Aerialate. These change moves instead of Pokemon. Normalize makes every move a normal type move, while Pixelate and Aerialate change normal moves into the Fairy type and the Flying type, respectively. And if all of that weren't enough, thanks to Generation 9, Pokemon can now Terastalize, giving them a potential and optional third stab type to work with. To help make this a bit easier to follow, let's use Castform as a case study. Introduced in Generation 3, Castform is an interesting Pokemon because of its signature move in that generation, Weather Ball. Weather Ball is a normal type move with a base power of 50. However, if weather conditions change, its power doubles and its type changes. So, if a Pokemon that isn't Castform, whose type changes with the weather, uses Weather Ball, it may gain or lose stab depending on the weather. A normal type Pokemon will lose stab on Weather Ball in harsh sunlight since the move becomes Fire type. However, a Fire type Pokemon would gain stab in harsh sunlight. In that way, since its type will always match the weather, except in a sandstorm, you can think of Castform as having a kind of weather-based Protean, which I find pretty neat. Boosting stab is an interesting phenomenon too. Before Scarlet and Violet introduced Terastalization, the only way to increase the 50% buff from stab was for a Pokemon to have adaptability. Adaptability is an ability that adds an additional 50% attack boost to moves that match the Pokemon's type. So, instead of the base 50% that stab normally gives, it's bumped up to 100%, doubling the move's power. Additionally, if a Pokemon Terastalizes into a type it already has, for example, a Skeledirge Terastalizing into a Fire type, it'll boost stab for that type to 100%, just like adaptability. It's worth noting that a Pokemon that Terastalizes in this way and has adaptability will only receive a 125% boost and not a 150% boost. Because, let's face it, 150 would be kind of absurd. Now that you should have a solid understanding of what stab is and how it works, I want to give you some ways to use it, both offensively and defensively. The most obvious thing is stab's offensive utility. It makes sense that every Pokemon should know at least one move that matches at least one of its types. That's just intuitive. But that should also help you decide how to build your team, especially as a beginner. Shifting your focus to collecting Pokemon whose stab offense helps fill in holes on your team can inform early decision making. For example, if you're playing Pokemon Emerald and choose Torchic as a starter, picking up Wingull or Lotad is a no-brainer, because Water, Flying, and Grass offer excellent type coverage and utility that Fire and Fighting just can't provide alone, especially in the early game. Hitting super effective damage is already important, but getting a 50% increase to that hit can mean the difference on whether or not a move one-shots. Even though Stab's bonuses are very much geared towards offense, there's no reason we can't use it to think about our defenses too. Remember how I said that every Pokemon should know at least one move that matches at least one of its types? Well, even though that's not a hard rule, it is also exceptionally rare for a player or NPC to not have at least one Stab move on a Pokemon. Now you may be asking, hey Admiral, how does any of this help me defensively? Well, that's a great question. If we can assume any one type of move on a Pokemon, we can therefore play around that type to ensure smart, safe switches. To help conceptualize this, let's pretend that I'm in a battle against a friend in, let's go with Gen 5, since I just finished Pokemon Black. He has a Superior out, and I'm using a Scolipede. I outspeed to take down his Superior with a Poison Jab, so he brings in a Musharna. Because Psychic is strong against Poison, I can assume that he's going for a Stab super effective move, because it would be weird if he didn't have a Stab move on that Pokemon since he brought it in. So of course, I switch to a Dark-type Pokemon, let's say a Bisharp. Because Dark is immune to Psychic, I switch for free and can take it down with a Night Slash, or something like that, on the next turn. In fact, if Scolipede could learn it, we could have hit a Stab super effective U-turn to switch and get damage in. Alternatively, if I didn't want to switch and were okay with potentially losing Scolipede, a Stab super effective Mega Horn would do nasty damage. If you didn't see how Stab could help us defensively before, hopefully you do now. We can predict our opponent's moves based on their Pokemon's type, and then respond accordingly. Of course, it won't always be as perfect as in the example, but switching around immunities and resistances is one of the most important skills to develop early. The last thing to consider is Terastalization. To be totally transparent, I still haven't quite gotten the hang of knowing when to Terastalize and of which Terra types I should be putting on my Pokemon, and that's only because I don't do a lot of multiplayer, so hopefully I can still provide some insight. Just as a reminder, Terastalizing does not remove previous Stab modifiers, so you should really think about Terastalization as either gaining offensive strength by adding a new Stab type, or as gaining a stronger defensive position by securing new resistances or immunities. If you're looking to use it offensively, consider boosting an existing type or giving Stab to a Pokemon that wouldn't have it on a move otherwise. For example, you could give a Pokemon with high physical attack a Ground Terra type, so it gets Stabbed on Earthquake. For defense, you should look to maximize resistances to existing weaknesses, or to give yourself immunities. A great example of this actually already exists in Scarlet and Violet, as Iono gives an Electric Terra type to her Mismagius, a Pokemon with Levitate. That means it has no weaknesses. Another good example would be giving a Dragon type a Steel Terra type, so it matches up into Fairy types more favorably. And, well, that about covers it for Stab. It's one of those mechanics that's incredibly vital to learn, but is also fairly straightforward. Hopefully, this video helped you along your journey towards Pokemon Mastery. It's a journey that I'm still on, but I want to try to leverage the experience and insight that I've developed over the years to make things a bit easier for everyone else. If this helped you out, you enjoyed the video, or you'd be interested in seeing more short-form content like this, let me know in the comments. Your feedback will help me learn what to improve on and what you'd like to see going forward. Provided people want to see it, the next video like this will be an explainer on IVs and EVs. But before that, I already know that my next gameplay video will be a return to Heart Gold, where I'll experience it for the first time completely normally. If you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.